Namaste to every one of you out there. Uh, what an amazing opportunity, an amazing day that we have to get to live and to grow and learn and find out who we are and who's been hidden from us and all kinds of amazing and wonderful things for humans. Uh, so I hope you guys are blessed. I hope you've been experiencing peace and uh, hope you've been practicing meditation and thoughtful mindfulness and all of those wonderful things that higher consciousness people do. Uh, Absolutely amazing on a thousand levels. The journey and all that's been learned about who we are and who we're not and who source ultimately is. Uh, so I hope you guys are coming along for the ride, and I hope that you are experiencing an increase in blessing and all of the wonderful things. And blessing is not always just about finances. Are about peace of mind and wisdom and understanding, and we're going to find some stuff out about those things. Really profound teachings that we have, and I will share in light of our Wednesday nights. We are definitely, guys. This stuff is just absolutely too bizarre for words. Uh, so I hope that you guys will be ready and excited to begin to see some things. I think at some levels that I probably have shared. This comes from someone who experienced it, and we've gone and we've come quite a ways on the reality and the revelation of humanity, uh, reincarnation, and past lives. As I shared with you guys on Wednesday night, that was quite a, if I could say it in the right terms, that was quite a mindgasm uh, last weekend. Uh, there was there was a lot that went on in a very short amount of time, and so I hope that you guys are recognizing that the shift is happening. Maybe you sense it as many of us here were sensing it. And for quite some time, I had been making the statement, I don't know what's going on in the cosmos, but there's something going on. And that very promptly chose to come into manifestation. And of course, the whole journey is flowing quite rapidly. So peace to each and every one of you. Love to you. I hope that you're experiencing love. It's the thing. It's the thing that we came to this earth to learn, and so I hope that you guys will as we all need to, that you will learn how not to increase your karmic load and to learn how to love like you've never loved before. If we do that, we will inevitably begin to rise and illuminate. At the same time, learning that many of the things that we learned, if had we known the code, would have saved all of us a lot of years. But since there's nothing that happens with source that's coincidence, I firmly am believing that all of the round the mountain that we did trying to find truth was actually part of the journey, and maybe it was the most valuable part. Uh, I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, when we as humans begin to value the things that others might deem as negative or hard or all of those things, struggles, when we learn to value those more than the times when there's not any of that going on, we will actually then have begun the journey of ascension. And it just continues to become more and more, whether it's through these books I'm sharing with you and others that I'm reading, or whether it is through people who are channeling. It's amazing to read a book that is quite old and listen to channelers who are saying the same things right now, only in a context of right now. And so Some of you may not know what any of that means. It might all be gobbledygook to you, and if it is, then I certainly think that if I don't have anything else to offer you, I would encourage you to not stop and not pull back. That now, for your own good, is the time when we need to go with the flow and release control of things and allow things to happen. What happens, happens, and if it happens, it's happening because it's supposed to happen. And that's kind of a massively new revelation for me. But I've had many new revelations recently. So we're going to look at chapter 6 of the Kybalion. You will find both today as well as everything else that will be brought in, you will find that what I'm doing is actually giving you wealth. The mass majority of people that in America that grew up and went to high school and graduated high school and then went to college, the mass majority of those people studied insignificant things to no avail, except a lot of expended finances and frustration and labor and all of those things. And so I do understand that nothing is coincidental, so maybe you needed that. And I think that's really been a massive revelation, is that if it is in fact true, and I've certainly come to the opinion that it is true, that nothing is by coincidence, then we need all of the flops and all of the failures and all of the didn't do's, and that there is actually a need in our life for those things. And of course, Source knows exactly what we need. So we're going to jump off here today. If you don't have the book, certainly I would stay alert. And if you can get it, and I know some have been reading it on their phones. The Kybalion is quite amazing. So we're in chapter 6. Let's see if there's anything that rings true for all the spiritual understanding and enlightenment that's been going on. Last week when we left off, we were given a statement, and it says, rest calm and serene. You are safe and protected by the infinite power of the Father, Mother, Mind. And one of the things that they've worked very hard, Christianity has worked excessively hard to do, is to hide from us. The American Indians had this connection. They had the connection. You can see it in Western movies. They had the connection between Mother Earth, and they called him the Great Spirit. And I think that's actually more appropriate than what Christianity had. How many of you still equate, and this may sound difficult for you, but we have a little bit of a misunderstanding. And part of that misunderstanding is we keep trying to do what people have done in the past, and we keep wanting to attribute to Source humanhood. I listened, it popped up, so once again, I know it wasn't coincidence, but I listened to somebody speak, very powerful speaker, and they wanted to remind us that the Bible told us that God is our Father and yada, 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 yada. And unfortunately, there's no human attributes that could be given to Source. He's not some things, he is everything. And so I recognize that's the desire of human minds to try to make something understandable in their very, very finite intelligence. But we really need to reconsider that thought. There are connotations. I don't say it's horrible. I don't say you've sinned. I don't say that you're doing wrong. If that's the way you have to connect with him, then I certainly would rather you connect with him in that manner. I'm speaking about something that's higher than that. Because words have connotations whether you recognize it or not. That's the reason that I don't, or I seldom use the word Jesus. Not that what the Bible says is so bad, it's all of the things that aren't true that are tied to that name. And I don't desire to bring those into the timeline or the dimension that I'm walking in. I don't have any interest in the fake Jesus, the Son of God. I would say right now there's probably been at least 25 or 30 billion sons of God that have lived on this earth. If you are a human, you are a son or a daughter of God. There wasn't a specific one that was sent. Was he an ascended master of sons of God? I'll go with that. But you need to understand, if you don't have the revelation, you need to get the revelation that you emanated from source. And as far as our finite minds can deal with, we then can consider ourselves to be sons or daughters of all. And so, but here's a statement made from at the end of the chapter from what we read last week, and I read it again, and it had seemed like it had more punch, so I'm going to share it again this week. This is the statement. Within the father-mother mind, how many of you are struggling with coming to terms with there's not some being sitting in a chair with a big gray beard in the heavens? Because I have to tell you, if you are still living in that realm, you're going to be probably a little bit disappointed today with this concept of tying attributes of humans to things that you don't understand, and how negative you are limiting not only yourself, you are limiting what source is capable of, what source really is. And so for all of us that were Christians, we have these pictures in our mind, and it's just going to take a long time to get rid of the picture. So within the father-mother mind, mortal children are at home. There is not one who is fatherless nor motherless in the universe. And so I'd like to, the reason that's so important, because along with everything else that we're going through, it's quite amazing to me at the belief systems that are getting torn down, and it's not a slow progression. Anyone who is living in a slow progression of what's going on, if I could say a slow progression of illumination, and I'm quite sure that I started what's happening here because of my incantations of mysticism that come out of Kabbalah that are in your Bible. We learned some really crazy things this week about Kabbalah, Israel, and the Bible. And just as they were polytheistic prior to the writing of the Bible, I've now been blessed with some new information that not only were they polytheistic, or in other words, they had many gods. There was no one single God in Israel. And you even see that still played out, although they hide it and lie to you, with the whole picture of El and Yahweh. History has El sitting as a lesser son at the table of El. Yahweh sitting at the table as a lesser son at the table of El. See, there's no way to get from there to what's written in the Bible without just rewriting a story. And so none of us, none of us, none of us, that's as huge in its reality as there is no sin. How many of you still struggling with sin? I hear people say words all the time, and I go, well, that's not the truth, but if that's where you're at in your mental belief system, then that's where you're at. You may not have the capacity at this time to go any further than that. But boy, we sure are doing ourselves a lot of damage. We may not have sin against God, and God may not be going to kill us, but please, dear one, don't for a second think that moral disintegration does not have a price, because it has a very high price, at least at the frequency level that we're at. So, if you understood all of that, wonderful. Blessed indeed you are. So, Chapter 6, the divine paradox. We have a paradox that is going on. Many of you may not quite know what that is. I would plug it into your phone and go Google what is a paradox. And so let's see this divine paradox that exists that you will find out at the end, have very little knowledge of at all. Everything that was done to us in Christianity was done to hide that paradox from us. So, listen to the statement. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Okay? So just as in the Old Testament there was a set of laws that were given by the God, so it is in the universe. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. So, for some New Age mindset that says there is no sin, we get the beginnings of a totally different picture. Is there a price to pay? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Is there a possibility in our future that will change? I would say it's not a possibility. I would say that is a probability. But the probability of that happening is quantitated and defined by the ability of humans to rise to a higher frequency and to lose the negative connotation. So really, and you're going to hear a lot about this, really it's not that punishment was done away with. It's really that we have ascended and become so conscious that we no longer do the things that bring the penalty. If we did the things that bring the penalty, guess what would happen? Karma will be reinstated in your life. I'll show you. And so these presumptuous fools, they are vain, or that vain means empty. They are empty, presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements. And I said all of that. There's a lot more significance to that. It's not that Source is doing something to them. It is that the laws that are put in place universally, when you break them, the earth will correct you for that. Things go against you. We call it, as you'll find out here shortly, we call it karma. So let's see. The truly wise, knowing the higher against the lower, the truly wise knowing the nature of the universe, use law against laws. The higher against the lower. So the higher, if you don't understand that, how might we define the higher laws versus the lower laws? Well, a picture of the higher laws would be that I now am mindful and live at a much higher consciousness, and so I no longer do those things that are lesser, that are base, that are lower frequency, that are density, and because I use the higher law, which is I get what I reap what I sow, my sowing has now lifted to a point that in my reward there is no negative. Is anyone tracking with that? Every bit of this is in your hands to change or to continue to live with. So, the truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe. What is the nature of the universe? Whatever thing a man sows, that's what a man reaps. So if you're truly wise, you really get that. And instead of walking around like a brain-dead person who has no vision, you can't see, and you just continue to do things that cause harm against you. Well, I didn't see it about myself. Well, obviously, because you just kept doing the same thing over and over again, and you kept getting bad things that come back at you. And you can't quite put it together. Why is the world against you? I've been there. Believe me, I've said those exact words. And so the truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, they use law against laws, the higher against the lower. And by the art of alchemy, they transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy. And because of that transmutation, they then triumph. Now, what does that mean? Because I may not make it to the first word of this chapter, but this is so huge. If you get this, you have one of the major keys to the universe. So if I learn how to use the higher against the lower, I will triumph. And if I do that repetitively, then my life will be a changing from doing things according to the lower and reaping the lower reward to one of doing things from the higher law, which is the law of good and love and kindness and mercy and forethought and wisdom and concern, and I could go on endlessly. Those are the higher laws. So mastery consists not in abnormal, and this is a really, really powerful statement against some of the things that are going on in our society, and there's so many so fine nuances that it's not even funny. But what I will say to you today is there is no spiritual practice that is stronger, there is no spiritual discipline that is stronger than the discipline of higher law. None. There are vehicles that we can use to get us to higher, but that in itself, if you think that I am saying to you that meditation is going to save you, you didn't get any of what I was talking about, because it's not going to. So check this out. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings, or living. What is he talking about? I think that should be pretty self-obvious what he's talking about. That's not where this lives. Is it something that we can use in our human finite journey while we exist in the human body? Yes, it is. But if you think that that's the thing and that's what you lock onto is the thing, it goes back to the whole Messiah syndrome of Christianity. Jesus came to save humanity, but he didn't come to save humanity in the manner in which all of us believe he came to save humanity. He came to show us as an example, and that was all. For those that see it, they will receive the reward because they will also, as he did, walk according to the higher law. Those who get it will walk according to the higher law, and the rest will continue to stay down here in the karmic realm. It's never going to go away, and it's never going to change. So mastery, being able to get that triumphed by doing the higher things and not the lower things anymore, the mastery of that, it does not consist of abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginations, or in your living, but in using the higher forces against the lower. If you want to attain mastery and you want to attain triumph, you must learn how to use the higher frequencies. Why is everyone talking about love so much? Because love is the higher. Paul was speaking mystically, and it's been really an amazing journey. Now that we have a picture of the code of the Bible, there's no need to get rid of the code of the Bible. We just need to get rid of all that's not. Most of the Bible is mysticism. And one of the things that I found out this past week, which was quite shocking to me, is that prior to the people, somewhere around 1200 BC, which is 2,000 years after the Sumerians were here, so 2,000 years, no, not 2,000 years, dear one, at least 24,000 years humans have been walking the face of this earth. So when you look at it from that perspective, Moses is really very young in the scheme of humanity. But prior to the Bible being codified, somewhere around Jeremiah's time, which is why he was so angry, because he understood that what they were selling, and you guys might, Source just keeps giving me revelation and insight because we went through Jeremiah so extensively, and it's absolutely blowing my mind how many truths. I believed that the priest had changed the rules, and that was what? Well, that is kind of, but it certainly was not the rules were changed in the manner in which I interpreted them. In fact, prior to the codifying of the Old Testament, all of Israel were a shamanic people. If you don't understand what a shaman is, it is what is called today by Christianity, they all practiced witchcraft. All of Israel. That's why they say of Moses, he was nothing but a shaman. I cursed somebody for saying that. And now, I myself will probably be cursed for saying that. But it is the truth. He was not the God man you thought he was. And he was not listening to Yahweh. If he was listening to Source. But then very little of the first 5 books of the Bible have anything to do with Moses. So mastery consists not in abnormal dreams or visions or fantastic imaginings or in living but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower. So let's get a beautiful picture here for everyone, because we are loved. Source loves us. We are seeing this because of his pure love, his benevolent action towards us, his kind action towards humanity. He is exposing the truth that has been hidden from most of us most of our life. That is an act of love. God is love, and in him is no darkness at all. Nothing can separate you, neither height, nor breadth, nor width, nor depth, nor spirit forces. Nothing can separate you from the love of Source. Wow. It's even infinitely bigger than when I heard it in Christianity, now that I understand what was really being said. So one thing that we immediately can learn from this statement is that the lower planes of life, which is where most of us still exist, have nothing to do with but pain. That is to say, most of what you're reaping in your life is the reward for the karmic actions that you're still doing. But alas, we're just getting started. So, using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes, and so here's the key for you, by vibrating on the higher. So, in a nutshell, if you don't understand what I just said, in a nutshell, as long as you stay low frequency, you're going to keep building up karma, and it's only when we begin to ascend. There is, if you're not paying attention all over the world, friends, right now, there is an awakening that is going on. It's flipping everything that we've ever known upside down. You say, what, all of a sudden is God changing? No, Source is not changing at all. Source always intended us to live as light. Man chose to do this. Man chose to glorify their ego. Why aren't we having things in football stadiums with 80,000 people where there is such a glory that goes up out of the top of that thing, like your crown chakra opening up to the very heavens, because that stadium is full of 80,000 people that are glorifying Source? Why isn't that what is desirous in this country, instead of going watching people ruin their bodies for the rest of their life for a mere few dollars that most of them will spend before they ever get out of the business? That's a picture of the higher versus the lower, the not ego versus ego. And so the only way, and I'm going to say this, and you can check it, but it is correct, the only way that we will ever escape the pains of the lower is by ascending. So listen at this. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon that the master uses. Well, what does that mean, and what is the significance of it? Well, the whole concept of alchemical transmutation is changing one thing into another thing. And so you hear a lot about transmutation because it literally is the same as an alchemist who spent their lifetime trying to change lead or tin or wood or rock or any other substance into gold so that they could enrich themselves. That is a transmutation. What does that mean in the human life? What that means is we must transmute. We must ascend higher than the human body that we live in to truly begin to expose the light that we are. And if I haven't messed you up by now, I think we're probably going to do okay. So let's look at some of this paradox. This is the paradox of the universe resulting from the principle of polarity, which manifests when the all begins to create. So anytime that all begins to create, there is a polarity. Those that are in electrical work, Dave's sitting here, Dave understands polarity completely, I'm sure. So when the all begins to create, there is always polarity that goes with that creation. Hearken to it, for it points the difference between half wisdom and wisdom. You've already heard what the picture of a half wise person versus the picture of a wise person. Hearken to it, for it points to the difference between half wisdom and wisdom. While to the infinite all, the universe, its laws, its powers, its life, its phenomena, are as things witnessed in the state of meditation or a dream. Did you just hear that? Everything that we know to be reality to all is nothing but something he sees in his mind. Wow. It's exactly the same as what somebody witnesses when they are in a state of meditation. All that you know, all that you can see, or a dream. Yet to all that is finite, the universe must be treated as real, and life and action and thought must be based thereupon. Accordingly, although with an ever understanding of our higher truths, each according to its own plane and laws. Were the all to imagine that the universe was indeed reality, then woe to the universe, for there would be then no escape from lower to higher, because all cannot change. Divineward, then would the universe become a fixity and progress would become less possible, more than impossible. And if man, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him. And like a sleepwalker, he stumbles ever around and around in a circle. How many of you have stumbled around and around and around the mountain in a circle? Making no progress. So this is also a blessing and a protective, because if you have been in that trend of stumbling around and around and around, there is an out, but you have to get off the hamster wheel. So, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him. And like a sleepwalker, he stumbles ever around and around in a circle, making no progress and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. So in other words, he caused it. This bruised and bleeding. So I began to ponder and ask myself, is there a way for me to not bypass the laws, but to learn the laws and live by the laws of my free will? Just because your free will says you want to continue to be like you've always been doesn't mean my free will is walking that same timeline. So it's like a sleepwalker. He stumbles around and around, making no progress. So look at the outworkings of this thought process. Walking blindly around and around in circles. You're never making any progress. You're being forced into an awakening. So Source, in his infinite love, because he infinitely loves, he keeps allowing spirit guides to tap you on the shoulder and put pressure on you, trying to get you to get it, and yet you refuse to. Why? Because you have your eyes closed and you just want to keep doing the life you've always done. You think that that life is what life is, and it's really nothing but a dream. and you're dreaming it. So, making no progress, being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. So no matter how long you choose to do this, friend, the natural laws are not going to change for you. And the only thing that it determines you're doing this walking around endlessly, having no benefit, nothing, is you just create more pain for yourself. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason of your upward gaze. And I would like to say this. There are many people in the spirit realm, if you haven't been listening, there are many people who are into levels of doing astral projection and going up into the astral plane. I experienced it last Saturday, so I know at least a small amount of what that does. But here's the thing that seems to keep coming up a lot, and that is once people actually receive that level of illumination, they want to stay in that place and they don't want to come back to earth anymore. That is to say, they want to walk around in a dream constantly, and that's not how it works. So they constantly have their mind up here, and they run in and they wreck their car. You know, if you're driving down the road and you're astrally projecting yourself into the heavenly, it's a very good possibility somebody in front of you going to slam their brakes on, and you're going to smash them while you're in your astral projection. So because we are in a human vehicle, a human car, we have to also function according to these laws here and those laws here. So remember the divine paradox that while the universe is not, still it is. Remember ever the two poles of truth, an absolute and a relative. Beware of half-truths. What Hermetists know as the law of paradox is an aspect of the principle of polarity. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to the appearance of the paradox and the consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question. And my friends, we were, contrary to that statement, we were taught to never accept the other side of the question. Can I tell you something? Whether it was intended or not, the destruction that's been done to humanity by that closed-mindedness should be quite obvious to you. If you want to know why has the world been through so much death and so much pain, because people are choosing to live at a lower standard and the low laws have to function. Humanity has done this to themselves. We did not have to live here. Wow, that's a good message. So, the warnings are particularly directed to the problems of the absolute and the relative, which perplex all students of philosophy and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and the relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of the half-truth, which is where we were at in Christianity. We only had a part of the truth, but it was overwritten and corrupted and coded so that we, unless we became enlightened, so here's a wonderful blessing to you. If you are still with me and you have been with me, friend, we have been on an assumption of illumination for 30 years. Why, after 30 years, have we ended up here and there are pastors in Austin that have twice that amount of time that they've been pastoring, and they are teaching half-truths and only half-truths? You have to ask yourself, if you are here with me, it must be something inside of you is intense. I don't care who you are, okay? You would have been gone a long time like a lot of other people if you did not have that spark of intensity inside of you. So teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question. And the warnings are particularly directed to the problems of absolute and relative, which perplex all students of philosophy and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. So because of that, we caution you as students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox. For every side, there's another. And we should look at both of them objectively and disconnected, which we also don't do. If you were a Christian and you were trying to evangelize, you were very, very intertwined in that belief system. That's why there have been so many fights and conversations over Christianity and religion. Because you were invested. You could not agree with the Jew that maybe theirs was also a perspective which neither made it right nor did it make yours wrong. But that is a person who loses the ego. The person that has ego desires to argue that point. Are you seeing it? There should be no place for arguments in our conversations about this stuff. If you disagree, you disagree. That's your perspective. All I'm here to do is to share what I believe Source reveals to me, no matter who doesn't believe that Source reveals to me. Just because you don't believe it doesn't change my reality. I know he does. So, we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of half-truth. And that's where we are trying to get our feet and our boots washed off and get rid of all of the mud. It's strange, too, they would use that language because David, listen to this statement, David said that it was Source, it was God who lifted him out of the miry clay his feet had slipped into. Would it surprise you if that was him making a statement metaphorically about the teachings of Israel? Jeremiah got it. I think David was a pretty special person. It wouldn't be, I think Solomon got it. So let's not become entangled in the mire of half-truth, but let's listen to the half-truth, and then how about we look for the other half so that we have whole truth? Maybe you've said this, and maybe you've heard me say it, but I believe all religion has at least a strand of true running through it. But a strand of true does not make 100% truth. So with this in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. It is quite amazing, friends. I've taken quite a while, but it's okay. I'm not in a hurry. So the first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality against which his instincts revolt. And of course, we say, well, if we had a rocket ship that would go there, we could go land a rocket ship on that moon, so it's got to be real. But to Source, it's just like a picture that he has in his mind. He thought it, and it was. So our instincts revolt because we can't deal with the reality of that. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and the relative points of view. From the absolute point of view, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria, as compared to the all in itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies. Remember, I'll show you a piece where you've read this or heard this out of the Bible. Heaven and earth are going to pass away. That was a human truth that was told us, and we bought it. The truth is, just as we are constantly changing, so are the universes, but even more so than that, dear friend, are all the universes that you know nothing about. And there are thousands of them. So we recognize this in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, it's born and died, for the element of impermanence and change, finiteness, and unsubstantiability must ever be connected to the idea of a created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the all. No matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both philosophers, metaphysicians, scientists, and theologians all agree on this idea, and the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions, as well as the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. So the Hermetic teaching do not preach the unsubstantiability of the universe in any stronger terms than those more familiar to you. Although their representation of the subject may seem somewhat more startling, you still have lived your whole life believing that heaven and earth will pass away. What was it that John and Peter said? I saw a new heaven coming down from on high. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal, untrue, and the universe comes under the rule in all schools of thought. From the absolute point of view, there is nothing real except the all, no matter what terms we may use in thinking of or discussing the subject, whether the universe be created of matter or whether it be a mental creation in the mind of the all. It is unsubstantial, non-enduring, a thing of time, space, and change, and we want you to realize this fact thoroughly because you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental nature of the universe. Think over any and all of the other conceptions and see whether this be not true of them, and of course it is true. But the absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. So when we look at source as God the Father, you might say we're looking at source in the relative sense. So it's the highest reason of man, of humans, as they understand them. So what is the highest reason? That he is a gray-haired man sitting in a chair in the heavens. Okay? Now, if you don't recognize on your own synchronicities, by the time this day is over, there's going to be so many synchronicities between this and what I'm going to read to you in a little while, it ain't even funny how the two are actually morphing and they're aligning with each other. So I guess, once again, something must have done that. Or was it all coincidence? The universe, and viewing it through mortal faculties, the universe is very real indeed and must be so considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not make the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts and the phenomena of the universe as they present themselves to our mortal faculties. So for us, it's like, well, yeah, I understand that that's God and that it's evolving or changing or moving or living or dying, but for us, it's reality. It's something that we believe we can go put our hands on. This is made up of nothing but energy, but it is energy manifested in the form of a book holder that I can feel. In the spirit realm, it's nothing but energy, just like you are nothing but energy. But the absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them. That's so crazy right there, it ain't even funny. Things as the mind of Source knows them. I wonder, I can't even, it's a true statement. Eye hasn't seen and ear hasn't heard, and neither has entered into the heart of man the things that Source has prepared for those people who love him. Friends, if you had an understanding about that statement, it was large, but I assure you the true understanding of that statement is infinitely larger than our minds are capable of handling. What a beautiful thought. Eye hasn't seen and ear hasn't heard the things which Source has prepared for those who love him. Wow, that's beautiful. Amazing. Things are the highest reason of man understands them. We can only understand what we can understand and what we will allow ourselves to understand. Sometimes we stop ourselves from understanding by questions. Sometimes if you don't have the knowledge to know what's being talked about, how do you know that you have the knowledge to ask the right question? Maybe it's simply that you're asking the wrong questions and you're getting the questions you ask answered, but they're not helping you. That also is part of that has to do with mindfulness and a higher consciousness. When we can see the right questions to ask, then we'll ask the right questions. But if you don't know what to ask, then how do you know whether you got the right one or the wrong one? Really important. All right, to take familiar illustrations, we all recognize the fact that matter exists. To our senses, we will fare badly if we do not, and yet even our infinite minds understand the scientific dictum that there is no such thing as matter. From a scientific point of view, that which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force called electrons or ions, vibrating and in constant circular motion, and such is everything. So now you understand to the basis thing that exists, which functions in a circular motion and vibrates and emits energy. Now you understand why the spiral is so significant. Anytime you see anything spiraling, cycling, going around and around, you should see your Creator. Because everything is like this constantly. It's all around you. You can't miss it. The clock, the moon, the sun, the morning, the night. That's why Paul says that the universe itself declares the majesty of Source. And so now science is finding that out. And it was quite shocking because we had a lot of really smart people that taught a lot about math and about matter, and they're looking for dark matter and CERN. Okay? These are the world's top scientists are looking for matter. So their matter is nothing but an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force called electrons or ions that are vibrating and in constant circular motion. That's why everything has a vibration, has a frequency. Humans also have a vibration and a frequency. It can be low And when it's low, it's like a bellowing of something, and you are calling to yourself every bad thing that you're scared of. And when your frequency is high, then you are calling to yourself every good thing. And the only way you win is to learn how to use those two. We kick a stone and we feel the impact. It seems to be real, notwithstanding that we know it to be merely what we have stated above. But remember that our foot, which feels the impact by means of our brains, is likewise matter, so constituted of electrons, and for that matter, so are our brains. And at the best, if it were not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or the stone at all. So if you didn't have that reasoning, you wouldn't even know you had a foot. So what is it? All of these things come out of our mind. So then again, the ideal of the artist or the sculpture, which he is endeavoring to reproduce in stone or on canvas, seems very real to him in his mind. So do the characters in the mind of the author or a dramatist, which he seeks to express so that others may recognize them. And if this be true in the case of our finite minds, what must be the degree of reality in the mental images created in the mind of an infinite source? Oh, friends, to mortals, this universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one we can ever know, though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it. To know it otherwise by actual experience, we must be the all itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of, if you would, the Father. So here's another beautiful thing with this raising your frequencies. If you want to be closer to God, I've heard people say that, cry that in church at the altar, I want to be closer to God. And if I'd have known then, it probably wouldn't have fared well in Christianity. But I promise you, instead of praying for him, I'd have had to just walk by him and tapped him on the shoulder at the altar and said, hey, friend, if you want what you just cried out for, here's the path. It's really not that difficult. But you can't stay who you are. This stuff is just so crazy. To know it otherwise by actual experience, and that's the piece that I wanted for us to get a hold of. It's not enough just for us to learn the truth. Once we learn it, even if we're not successful at doing it, I'm learning very quickly now, the same way that I'm talking about, that I have to continue. I've started some things that I've seen and I've heard other people say, and I'm starting to do them now with my mind. And I recognize that I didn't get all the results that I wanted. That is to say that I am focusing and dealing with telepathy right now. And I believe that there has to be a way where you can speak to people without having to say a word. We are so far from that, but everywhere you go, every scientist says that any beings that the government has encountered, they all speak telepathically. And so do we have energy force in our brain enough to be able to send a signal from here to there with no wires and make that person hear what I had to say? I think it's a worthwhile journey. I don't think it's going to hurt me a bit. And along the way, I'm practicing using the spiritual mentality which I'm expected to have if I desire to come higher, a higher consciousness, if you would. And so we certainly can raise from plane to plane and higher to higher, and to know it otherwise by actual experience, we must be the all itself. Well, of course we're never going to ascend to the all. If the all was, everything that I have simply thought would have come into existence. And I'm not unrealistic in my knowledge, but I do think that the power we do have, we don't know anything about it, and how can you know how to use it if you don't know anything about it? You can see one of my rifles are beautiful, and they've killed animals at long ranges, but that rifle just laying there ain't going to kill no animal at long range for you. You got to know how to use it. And so we all have to learn how to function in the spirit realm. I know I preached this 30 years ago. In fact, my message has never been any different. I always preached expecting miracles. And I was blessed. I got to see some true miracles. So it is true that the higher we rise in the scale, what scale? Well, we can apply that to the scale of frequency. I shared it with y'all in one of the very first weeks. This is the scale of frequency. Don't be down here. It's bad, bad, bad. There ain't none of it that's good. If you want good, we need to go higher. And wherever you are higher, you need to go higher. So instead of staying stuck in the mire, then this is a climb out of the pig slop, if you would. The veritable prodigal son. Where did he find himself? He found himself in the pig slop, in the mire, in the mud. He was weighted down. And the beauty of the Father, if y'all didn't know that, that's really a metaphysical thing. It has nothing to do with the rest of the story. It's a metaphysical picture telling you about how we get out. You have to get out of the mud. So as we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach, the more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things, but not until the all finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us recognize the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws, and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life. Now, I want to know why ain't nobody teaching that, why that isn't taught in public school. That should be part of the kindergarten. That we are light and we are great physical beings, but there is many, many paths that you will have to be careful of on this journey called human. They should be teaching that in public school. The laws of the universe. All, this is an amazing statement, all except for the all are bound by them. What is in the infinite mind of the all is real, in a degree second only to that reality itself which is vested in the nature of the all. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the all. Can I please get you to take 5 seconds and maybe take a big breath? Breath work is really important too. I want you to just think on this. Ponder in your mind we're just talking a few seconds here. And I promise you it'll change your life, and it'll change all of our lives if we'll continue to practice it. Think about you get in a stressful situation and you get in your car. Now, I'm not perfected by any means, but just because I'm not perfected doesn't mean that I don't believe this works and that this isn't the direction that I'm headed. In fact, quite the contrary, it's exactly the direction that I'm headed. But here's the thing that I want you to know. What if you said to yourself when you get in those situations, instead of letting your shadow triggers get pulled, what if you could bring yourself into a state mentally where you would then say, I am held firmly in the mind of all. Do you think that might help you reset again and again and again? To affirm to yourself that God is love and in Him there is no darkness. If you make the wrong decision, you make a wrong decision. I need to do something obviously to fix that, or I will what? I will keep making the wrong decision. So it's not okay for us to do wrong things. So, there is nothing to hurt us or for us to fear. And so, if you haven't done this, maybe you can utilize some time with your mind when things are going bad. Instead of speaking all of the negative things under your breath that most people do, What if you begin to speak things that are true? So here's the difference between trying to brainwash yourself and affirming yourself. There's a lot that goes on, and a lot of people are saying words, and I hate to say it, but it seems like it's a form of brainwashing somebody. I say, why don't we focus on what we believe is true, and why don't we focus on that instead of focusing on what's negative, and instead of focusing what is not true? And what is true, one of the things, if I don't have anything else, is that my Father loves me. And if you're having a confidence problem with Source's love, I don't care what you have to do. I don't care if you have to go binge for a weekend watching NDEs and seeing all of the people that have come back and they wept because of the sheer love that got poured on them. However, you need to get the revelation of how much He loves us. You need to get the revelation. And of course, He's always kind. He always wants us to get the revelation, but many times we do everything to stop the revelation, not anything to boost the revelation. And so there again, it's not that you're sinning, you're just causing yourself more conflict, you're just slowing down your progress. I'm okay every now and then, and we laugh about it here, that I probably ran around the mountain as many times as anybody has, and in some things probably a whole lot more. And so on the same side that you're at that point, then its first revelation is you got to come to that I'm tired of running around this dang mountain. Until you get that revelation, nothing else will work. But then once you get that revelation, then you just move to the next revelation. What is it now? Well, now I'm dealing with this. I got out of that, but now I'm over here dealing with this. And so if you will try to open your eyes and see that how we practice the laws is by using them every day in everything that we encounter. What law fits this? What law is here? Well, the law, if you just turn one law of karma, that if I do something that's not correct here, then I'm going to reap for it. On the other side, if I do something that is correct here, then I'm going to reap a positive harvest. And as I said, you have to practice to where that just becomes an instinct. In fact, then it becomes part of who you are. Because you just make those kind of decisions without having to even think about them anymore. But when you have to think about them 20 times before you make the right thing, there's a long ways between that and it just simply hit me, and I never thought about it after that. It's just like learning about thoughts, that just because other people have thoughts doesn't mean those thoughts are on your timeline or part of your plan. They're not necessarily wrong for having them, and you're not wrong for not accepting them. But what an amazing revolution when we stop and really begin to get the revelation of how much God loves us. And sometimes you have to have things happen for you to recognize His love. And that's okay, because He's more than willing to send the things that'll help you get it. Ask yourself in every situation, especially the adverse ones, what does Source want me to learn out of this? Now, I think it's just as equal that you do it during the good ones, because in the good ones is where our minds typically get idle, and that's when you need to probably try to keep your mind awake by asking the question, what can I see out of this situation? Okay, I got a good pay raise, but now I'm on salary and I got to work 90 hours a week, and I don't like 90 hours a week, but hey, I got a blessing, right? You see what I'm saying? That's all conscious revelation that has to come to you. So we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization when once attained, the calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep. That's an old saying. Resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of infinite mind. And I would probably although I love those eloquent words, I would probably sum it up as when we really trust Source, we don't have conflicts like everybody else. And both are equally valid. His just infinitely more eloquent. I'm more of a pragmatist, I guess. But we can walk in peace and when we know who He is, so that we know that we should trust him. And then once we know that we should trust him, simply trust in him. In the all, indeed, and here you go, we live and move and have our being. And when Paul said that, friend, once again, it just speaks to Paul was anything. I know now I'm getting a completely picture without even having to go read the Bible, just the stuff I knew of it. Why did Paul need to leave the Pharisees? He needed to leave the Pharisees because he found out the truth, and the truth couldn't exist with the Pharisees. So he went from being one of them and beating people to being one of them that was beaten by them. Can I give a revelation to you? That's the perfect picture for you of karma. Whatever you do to someone, someone is going to do to you. Wow, that's huge. How amazing to be held firmly by Source and to know that it's going to be okay. It is going to be okay. Wow. So we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization. When once attained, then calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep. Resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of the infinite mind, which is the all. In the all, indeed, we move and live and have our beings. Matter is nonetheless matter to us. Having that revelation doesn't change the carnal things on the plane that we live on called Earth. Although we know it to be merely an aggregation of electrons or particles of force vibrating rapidly and gyrating around each other in the formations of atoms, and the atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating and forming molecules, which latter in turn form larger masses of matter, nor does matter become less matter when we follow the inquiry still further and learn from the Hermetic teachings that the force of which the electrons are but units is merely a manifestation of the mind of all. And like all else in the universe is purely mental in its nature, while on the plane of matter we must recognize its phenomena, we may control matter as all masters of higher or lesser degree do, but we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore it in the relative aspect, at least so long as we dwell upon its plane. Nor do the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them likewise to be merely mental creations. They are in full effect on the various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. So it is a true statement then, when the people of this planet Earth, when their consciousness and their mind has reached a high enough level of consciousness, we will no longer tolerate unconscious people. There will be a dividing of the line. Now, we know from many channelers that the dividing of that line is something that is real. It doesn't mean that anybody's going to get gone to hell. It just means you may need to live another term in a lower frequency place to fix your karma problem before you are allowed to come where the other side of this timeline ended up at, which is totally separated in a different dimension from you. It's like there's coming a time when there's going to be a door that opens from one dimension to the other, and those who have ascended high enough will go through the door, and the rest will be locked back down here in this horrible plane again. That sounds like a rapture to me, but not at all like the Bible says. Nobody's heard that before. If I'm moving too fast, I apologize. So, and like all else in the universe is purely mental in its nature, while on the plane of matter we must recognize its phenomena. No denying any of that. We're good. We are good. So, the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them, likewise to be merely mental creations. That's the laws of nature. That's the laws we deal with down here. Purely mental creation. They came out of our minds and we said, well, this would protect and this would do. All of those things, there's no hiding. They are in full effect on the various planes, but we overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. And that's a really profound statement, brothers and sisters. You want to know how to overcome the laws that are functioning in your life? The only way you will overcome them is to function by a higher set of laws. Otherwise, there will never be any change. And that's a message that very few people are teaching. Most of the people that are in spiritualism have probably never read this book. Because if they did, they would have an understanding about things that they're saying, and they're not bad people and they don't mean harm. And I'm not a bad person, and I certainly don't mean any harm, but I've certainly caused plenty. But we cannot escape law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the all can escape law, and that because the all is law itself, from which all laws emerge. The most advanced masters may acquire the powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being in the great hierarchy of life whose being and power transcend even that of the highest masters amongst men to a degree unthinkable by mortals. But even the highest master and the highest being must bow to the law and be as nothing in the eye of all. So, the true Yahusha still had to bow himself before the all. He wasn't the all any more than you're the all, and yet we're all the all. So here's a funny picture. Do you see that line in there? It says you must bow before the law. Yeah, if you know the Bible, you'll get it. So that even if these highest beings whose powers exceed even those attributed by men to their gods, if even these are bound by and are subservient to law, then imagine the presumption of mortal man of our race and grade when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary, and illusory, because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that the laws are mental in nature and simply mental creations of the all. It's so cool. You know, that whole subjection to the mental of all, it's, wow. He simply thinks something, and everything obeys. I'm wondering if there's any possibility that we could learn how to practice and get into a part of that. All intends to be governing laws are not to be defied or argued away. So long as the universe endures, will they endure, for the universe exists by virtue of these laws which form its framework and which hold it together. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, life, or evolution. In fact, science merely corroborates the Hermetic teachings. The latter merely teaches that the nature of the universe is mental, while modern science has taught that it is material, or of late that it is energy at the last analysis. The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. And I think that's exactly what I've been sharing. Everything is energy. And it all emanates And that's what creates the things that are. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws that have ever been promulgated, and they believe Spencer to have been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in the ancient Egyptian thousands of years ago and who later incarnated is Heraclitus, the Grecian philosopher who lived BC 500, and they regard his statements of the infinite and eternal energy as directly in the line of the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that his energy is the energy of the mind of the all. So everything is functioning because of the energy of the all, and everything is energy, so everything is all. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher whose work shows the results of the preparation of his previous incarnation. His teachings regarding evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding the principle of rhythm, so the student of Hermetic need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views against regarding the universe. All he is able to do is to grasp the underlying principle of the all is mind. The universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out obscure points and to throw light on the dark corners. This is not to be wondered at when we realize the influence of the Hermetic thought on the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought the theories of modern science largely rest. The acceptance of the first Hermetic principle, mentalism, is the only great point of difference between modern science and Hermetic students, and science is gradually moving towards the Hermetic position in its groping in the dark for a way of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in its search for reality. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomena are just as real so far as man is concerned, as they would be under the hypothesis of materialism or energyism. Under any hypothesis, the universe in its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing, and transitory, therefore devoid of substantiability and reality. But note the other pole of the truth. Under any of some hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial, with this difference always between the various hypotheses that under the old views, mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism it becomes the greatest natural force. And it is, and we're just beginning to get to where we can experience what is. And this one difference revolutionizes life to those who understand the principle and its resulting laws and practice. So please, I hope this doesn't bore you. And I know it's wordy and it's in depth and all of those things, but man, I hope it's worth it to you just to hear some insight about who it is and how we've been robbed. So finally, the students all grasp the advantage of mentalism and learn to know use and apply the laws resulting therefrom, but not yield to the temptation which, as the Kybalion states, overcomes the half-wise and which causes them to be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things. The consequent being that they wander about like dream people, dwelling in the world of dreams and ignoring the practical work and life of man. The end being that they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. Rather, follow the example of the wise, which the same authority states, use law against laws, and the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and you by that triumph, those things we read earlier. That's the picture for us of how to have an amazing life while we're down here, or at least as amazing as we can. We have to recognize the laws, and then we begin to use them, and we recognize that the higher ones are stronger than the bottom ones, and because of that, we begin to use those, and because of that, we begin to change. Change is a big deal, friends. I'm sorrowful for those people who believe that God made you like this, but I'm sorry to tell you, He didn't. Maybe this physical body, but that's the end of it. Our minds have been in the control of other people most of our life, and the other half of it is us not doing them any good. So, follow the authority. Let us avoid the half wisdom, which is folly, which ignores the truth that mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginations or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Remember always, student, that transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. The above quotations are from the Kybalion and are worthy of being committed to memory by the student, and there's no question that's true. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in a universe which, while relative, is real, so far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live, using the laws to rise from lower to higher. Living on, doing the best that we can under the circumstances arising each day, and living so far as is possible to our highest ideas and ideals. The true meaning of life is not known to men on this plane, if indeed to any, but the highest authorities and our own intuitions teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us so far as is possible, and realizing the universal tendency in the same direction in spite of apparent evidences to the contrary. We are all on the path. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leads to true life. That's the path. And the road leads upward ever with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise who perish by reason of their folly. I don't know about you guys, but they didn't teach me this much in all of Christianity about how I can stand in a place of peace and knowing. How many of you, maybe you lived your life as a Christian, and I know I've talked to enough people, so I know there's a bunch of them, and I know there's a bunch of them that have been in Christianity for a long time. How many of you find more peace now than a month ago, than 2 months ago, 6 months ago? Well, if that is in fact the case, then it's just simply proof that the Word is working. No matter how great, this isn't a race for any of us. Some people will make great gains fast, other people will not. Does that make one any greater than the other? Absolutely not. It just means that that's a journey you're on. It's okay for it not to be somebody else's. If somebody else jumps 2 spaces ahead of you, it's okay for them to jump 2 spaces ahead of you, and it's okay for you not to go 2 spaces. And that's a huge pace that we I think that fits really with the scripture that tells us that those who judge themselves amongst themselves are not wise, and that makes really a lot of sense. People equate their spiritual value by how they perceive other people perceiving. Think about that a bit. Doesn't even necessarily mean that it's true most of the time, but that's what you think it is. And so it's vitally important if we choose, if we desire, if you have a desire to learn more and to grow and to find out about in a life that you've never experienced, then we're certainly on that journey. I don't say it'll be always easy, but I don't say it'll always be hard either. I think there's lots of times when it just comes, they call it getting in the flow, man. And those of you in Austin who've ever been to Slitterbahn, they got a swimming pool that goes around. It's an outside flow of water, and it's flowing so hard that if you put yourself in one of them float things and you just lift your feet up off the bottom of that swimming pool, that water will lead you all the way around the outside. I think that's a good metaphoric picture of what the Spirit will do when we don't resist. Sometimes we staunchly resist. Sometimes we simply turn and try to walk against the flow. And when you do that, of course, it's not going to go well with you. It's going to wear you out, and you're not going to get anywhere. So on the other side, when you turn around and you just go with what the Spirit is doing in your life, you say, well, am I supposed to accept everything? No, I don't think that that's necessarily what's being said. Resisting everything that happens on this earth is a different story than going with the flow of the Spirit. So, well, I think we're going to take a break and take some time to use the bathroom. We'll be back. For those of you who choose to, we're going to look again at another aphorism and how to know God. Namaste. All right. Well, namaste. We're glad to be back. I hope you had a nice race, got a cup of coffee, whatever you needed to do. We're going to look at a piece in the How to Know God, and I don't know if it is for y'all, but it's really been amazing, the journey of the whole concept of yoga, which ties with meditation, which ties with your chakra energy, but how close many of the beliefs, how the message really is the same if you take religion out of it. And so we're on aphorism number 18, and this is the 18th aphorism goes like this. The other kind of concentration is that in which the consciousness contains no object, only subconscious impressions which are like burnt seeds. It is attained by constantly checking the thought waves through the practice of non-attachment. And this practice of non-attachment is really it's a whole nother branch all by itself, because it really requires some mental discipline on our part to detach ourselves from things. We are so, like this to everything. We're like this to dogma. We're like this to belief systems, and we have to learn how to become an observer and not a reactor. So, when the spiritual aspirant has achieved the highest degree of concentration upon a single object, he is ready to attempt the supreme feat. Concentration upon consciousness itself. Now, I want you to take a hold of this, because I've been sharing about the shadow is your subconscious, and that we use 95% in our everyday lives are 95% subconscious, the programs that are running back here that always run all the time. And the program that runs here, where we have our logical thought at. And so this achieving the highest degree of concentration, you could then take that and you could go, well, then isn't a higher consciousness actually that people are concentrating more? I think there's a place you could say that. But if you're here, if you guys are an ex-conspiracy theorist or you're still a conspiracy theorist, do you really think Paul Harvey hadn't recognized something when he talked about the dumbing of America? Can I tell you why they want to dumb you down? Because it's easy to control dumb people. And so some of people send me things about financial crisis and what Biden, and that's wonderful. Those things are probably real. But here's the thing that we have to get a revelation about, and that we have to hold on to. That in and of itself would cause us to be in fear in all kinds of things. But the ability to be able to think higher is directly tied to consciousness. So they say that this is the state of perfect yoga, and I know that you guys probably understand, but you have to kind of some of these terms. We don't always get these terms. Please don't get hung up on the term. There's been several things that I read, and then I went back and I went, well, I don't know what that word means. So my gosh, we're doing a monumental task. We're a bunch of people who have no great educations for the most part, and yet we still desire truth. If we don't have anything else in common, it should be that we desire truth. And inevitably, if the Bible says, how can two go together except they agree? Can I give you the answer? It's still the same as it used to be. They won't. They call that in spiritual world the changing of timelines. but it's exactly the same concept. So, this is the state of perfect yoga in which one passes beyond prakriti, which we shared last week about, beyond all objective knowledge into union with the Atman, the undifferentiated universal consciousness. Wow. The state of perfect yoga can only be entered into when the thought waves have been stilled and the mind has been cleared of all of its samskaras, both the evil and the good. And then you get into Carl Jung. The evil and the good is talking about the dark shadow, the shadow inside of you. I encountered it this morning, and there was a release, and I will see changes over the next weeks that have manifested in my life because of that. So, when Patanjali has ceased to believe that he is Patanjali and knows that he is none other than the Atman, yoga philosophy teaches us that it is the samskaras that drive us from birth to birth, just as strongly rooted addiction drives a man to take a drug over and over again, even in spite of his conscious declination. How many people have you heard when they film these homeless people on the street that are junkies? How many of you have heard them talk to those people and those people say, I wish I could get off? But why don't they? Have you, maybe you have, I've had some loved ones that are in that state, and you ask yourself, well, why won't they quit? Why don't they just figure out what the rest of us figured out and just not do it? Because, dear one, it's not as easy as all of that. No, neither was it that easy for us when we were in that state. And so, we may say and sincerely believe that we are weary of the world with its can I say it? Interrelated pleasures and pains. Can I give you what that picture just says from earlier? If you learn how to use the higher laws against the lesser laws, because in the lesser laws are what? I said it with y'all over there, are pain. Now we're in a yoga, and we just heard that if you want to learn how not to go through the pain, learn how to go higher than the pain. Why am I saying that? Because I want you guys to understand, these are not the only two sources of these teachings that exist. There are many from many different places. And one of the things I'm finding amazing is that if you listen to them and quit being dogmatic about every single thing that isn't the same, and you listen to the flow of these, almost every one of these that I've studied are saying the same message. Well, that now sounds like something that would come from source. Everywhere you go, if you listen to 5 channels on TV, if the 5 channels are saying things that totally fight with each other, there's a problem. If they are saying things that are different facets and they don't talk about that, but this one talks a lot about that, that's because that's the gift that they were given. None of us are given all of the gifts. All of us are given some of the gifts. And so, yoga philosophy teaches that it is the samskaras that drive us from birth to birth, just as strongly rooted addiction drives a man to take a drug over and over again, even in spite of his conscious declination and the efforts of his moral will. We may say and sincerely believe that we are weary of the world with its interrelated pleasures and pains, the sweet and the bitter fruits of the tree, but in fact, we are not, as long as these subconscious tendencies remain. So here we are again, talking about the subconscious ruling your life. Isn't that crazy? we should give a little more heed to this thing about programming and unprogramming of our subconsciousness if we recognize that it's that detrimental, or can be that detrimental to our lives. What if we could all really be living a lot better life if we would just deal with some of these things in our life that we were always told to hide? I don't know about you guys, but we weren't given a lot of opportunity to be very emotional about anything. You know what I'm saying? So, our desire to return and plunge once more into sense experience is far deeper than we realize. Beside it, our physical and spiritual hangovers, our temporary fits of disgust and repentance count for nothing. Shakespeare has described this recurring process of attraction and aversion in one of his most powerful sonnets. Enjoyed no sooner but despised straight. Past reason hunted and no sooner had. Past reason hated as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad, says Shakespeare. It follows, therefore, that when the samskaras had been rooted out and destroyed, as they must be before the state of perfect yoga is achieved, there will no longer be any urge towards rebirth. He who achieves yoga is said to be liberated. When his present life ends, he will be united with the Atman forever. However, the achievement of perfect yoga does not necessarily mean that the immediate end of the mortal life. Saints have reached a supreme spiritual experience and continued to live for many years. They have continued to think, speak, and act on the plane of external phenomena, but with a difference. The thoughts, words, and actions of a liberated person are said to be like burnt seeds. That is to say, they are no longer fertile. They cannot bring forth any more samskaras. They cannot create any new addiction or bondage. In Sanskrit, a mental or physical act is called a karma. Many of you may have heard karma. Some of you may say that, but I don't think that we completely have a full understanding, at least not from what we're finding out, because the more we study, the more we find things that are going on, like people from other dimensions, and we are affected by their karma. Is anybody awake today? Hold on. It's not now just what I sow is what I reap. It's what my family members from 5 generations ago sowed, and the water's still rippling, and I'm still getting hit by those waves. I think we need to know and find out as much as we can. Because what if it really is true that that is the case? Inevitably, there are people who are doing that through the spirit realm now, but I'm going to tell you, just like with many things that I've had things to say about recently, about the diminishing and the thinning of the separations between, like with gender and other things that we absolutely had no clue about, and all of a sudden now it's becoming very clear that there's some reasons for some things that are going on that we didn't know anything about. So what about karma? If karma is the seed that we sow and what we receive, I think that's extremely important for us. Karma is also the word to describe the consequences of this act, and hence to describe what we call our fate. But it really wasn't fate, it was really karma, but it was predestined. If you do this, this is what you're going to get. That's the only predestination. You have choice in everything that you do in your life. And there is no real right or wrong decision. Sometimes you learn the most when you make the wrong decision. Because I guarantee you the right decision gets a lot clearer after you make the wrong decision. And so even in that, everything's not great, but everything's wonderful. Everything has a purpose, if we are willing to allow ourselves to learn from everything, which is part of higher consciousness. So, since our fate is nothing but the sum of the consequences of our past actions in this, and here it even comes out in the Patanjali, and our past lives. See, understand that the whole lie and the concoction of no reincarnation only exists for the most part. I don't know about Islam, but it only exists in Christianity, and that was implanted there. Everyone, the Gnostics that lived before Constantine and his Christians, the Gnostics, which would have been what Yeshua was, a mystic, a Gnostic, they all believed in reincarnation. And you've been lied to and told that there was no reincarnation because Yahweh, the God that likes to kill his people over here, he said that you only live one life. It ain't the only thing he lied about either. But you can be sure that's what it was. Whoever wrote it. Since our fate is nothing but the sum of consequences of our past actions in this and previous lives. Why did I say that? I said that because we need to recognize that these dimensions are functioning and they do have an effect on us. So here's another thought for you in the act of love. If my ancestors' ripples are still affecting me, what will be the effect of you on your ancestors that come after you? Like, what will the effects of my behavior be to my grandchildren? What will the effects of my behavior of living in the world and sending karma, what will that be to my great-grandchild? And of course, if you don't care about any of them, then you don't care what you do anyways. But on the other side, for some people who are trying to be better people, I ought to be considering, if I know that reincarnation is true, and you have to choose and make a choice as to whether you even believe that. And if you don't, it's okay. On the other side, if you do, it's true. I mean, I'm not trying to be egotistical or anything, but there's just too much proof out there. Too much proof, both in the spirit realm and in the NDE stuff. I mean, it's now they have whole think tanks that are made up of people that are studying people who have near-death experiences. And guess what their conclusion is, friends? Oh, wow, that's real. Actually, they're all over the Bible. Every one of those people that got raised had an NDE. So karma is the word used to describe the consequences of this act, and hence to describe what we call our fate. Since our fate is nothing but the sum of the consequences of our past actions in this and previous lives. After a man has achieved liberation in yoga, his acts will cease to produce karma. And that's the piece right there. Now I want to show you how this ties to the Kybalion. In the Kybalion, we just found out if you do lower things, you suffer pain. And if you do gooder things, you don't suffer pain. Can I tell you these two books written thousands of years apart are saying exactly the same message? This just excited the heck out of me when I was pre-reading this. I went, man, I don't know how Source is doing this with things that are so separate, but they fit just like that. So, can I give you an insight why Kryon, and if you haven't watched Kryon, you should. He's really a huge inspiration to me. He's crazy. This truth is absolutely mind-boggling. But it also exists here. Now, maybe he studied Patanjali, and that's why Kryon spoke that, or maybe it just so happens that it's a truth. There is coming, they say, to us, dear friend, that there is coming a time when karma and the Akashic record will no longer exist. And I struggled with that, and there's others with me that struggled with that concept that somehow karma is going to be done away with, and somehow the Akashic record of your life, the record of your life, that those things are going to cease to exist. The purpose of the Akashic record is for you to go examine your records and see the damage you did to other humans. really funny that that would be the explanation of the Akashic, but you never hear that in Christianity. I think that's a pretty important spiritual concept, that everything that I do, I'm going to be confronted by it. And I have to be the one who passes judgment, not God Almighty sitting on a throne with his long gray beard in his hands looking like Abraham Lincoln. Okay? Me. I am going to judge me. And so it is. Listen at this statement. Our fate is nothing but the sum of consequences of our past actions in this and previous lives. So I want you to retain that. There are things that are functioning in your life, friend, that are coming, and we are finding out this as well, that are coming into your life, and it's coming into your life from past lives you had. That's a little bit bigger picture. What does Christianity do to deal with that? Nothing. They don't even know it. They don't even believe it because they don't believe that there's reincarnation. But Yeshua clearly believed in reincarnation. It's right there in the scriptures that he did. So the remainder of his earthly life will be governed only by the karmas which were already in existence before his liberation. So what that means is as we're on this path of ascension, our karmic load of before this ascension will probably be infinitely greater than our karmic load after. As we go up and as we continue to learn and we continue to raise in frequency, the karmic load diminishes because we're naturally doing things that don't cause karma, like goodness and love and mercy and kindness. Wow. So you mean I really am the captain of my own destiny in that manner? Of course I am. And the faster I can, the practicing that I was so enamored by in the first session here, friend, is speaking to this thing right here. It's totally up to me to choose what I want. Your life is because of you. Whatever that is, good, bad, indifferent, I'm not speaking to that. I'm just telling you whatever it is, it's based on what's going on inside of you, which is causing these things that we're talking about. You want to fix it, go higher. Why is it important that we raise our frequencies? Because we make less karma and our lives just look so much prettier. Some of you are experiencing a piece of that. Source wants everybody to experience that. That's the purpose. It wasn't to bring us, it's really been a hard 2 months for me because I got to be honest with you. That Christian dogma crap is deep. I find oftentimes myself slipping back over into the hate and the anger of Yahweh, and I have to say, stop. That's not the truth. Maybe you're experiencing that too. It's okay. It's okay. But after we receive liberation, the writer says here, but as we begin to raise our frequencies, we have less incidences that create karma, and our karmic load gets less by changing our life. That's the transmutation. The remainder of his earthly life will be governed only by the karmas which were already in existence before his liberation. He is like an actor on the night of a play. He knows that the play will never be performed again, no matter how well he does his part, no matter whether the audience boos or applauds. He has nothing to gain or lose by his performance. Nevertheless, he must play it through to the end until the final curtain falls and he can go home, which is when we will be out of this place, this plane. Speaking of the actions of one who has achieved liberation, the great philosopher and saint Shankara tells us, such actions are performed as it were from memory. They are like the remembering actions of a dream. (19) When such concentration is not occupied by non-attachment, and ignorance therefore remains. So what happens when you don't get the non-attachment part right, and all that is left is ignorance? The aspirant will reach the state of the disincarnate gods and become merged into the force of nature. Concentration without non-attachment cannot bring liberation. Have any of you ever found it really hard, especially if it's a family thing? Have you ever found yourself to have a problem standing and listening objectively? Like, while they're talking, you're already formulating what you're going to say, which really, and I watched this and I've done this a lot, when you're thinking about your response while the person is still talking about what they're saying. And so how could you possibly always know what the right response would be, because you never heard what they had to say? We have to non-attach. We have to step back and go, you know what? How does this affect me this way, good or bad? So in other words, in many cases, it will cause us to stop and take time just to listen and think before we create that great, that's my final answer. So, speaking of the actions of one who has achieved liberation, the great philosopher and Saint Sankara tells us such actions are performed as it were from the memory. That's the ideal that we should be looking for. How can I learn to live at higher frequency and it become natural? I spoke to that a little bit earlier, that would be a really desirable place for us to get. What happens then? Because we just naturally flow and we don't have all the hang-ups that we have now. Our life, can I say, is probably a whole lot more drama-free, and doesn't mean we don't have hiccups, but when we have them, we handle them and we go on and they don't deter us. Maybe some of you every now and then are a little bit emotional and something happens and you get ticked off and it affects you all day long. Anybody alive that does that? Well, part of non-attachment is not letting that happen. I recognize, why did this trigger me? That should really be the question that you ask yourself in everything you do every day. When somebody triggers you, the first question ought to be out of your mouth is, why did that trigger me? And you don't even need to say it. You just need to say it in your mind, because this is all mental. Why did that trigger me? Is there any truth to what they said? Is that why that triggered me? So when concentration is not occupied by non-attachment and ignorance therefore remains, the aspirant will reach the state of the disincarnate gods and become merged in the forces of nature. Concentration without non-attachment cannot bring liberation. You can concentrate all that you want to. And this is going on. This is very relevant words to the person who desires from the other book to attain triumph, which is what? Triumph is the act of doing the higher thing until you get so good at it that that's all you do. And when you do that, then you have victory and you no longer have to suffer the pains of the base. Are both of these saying the same exact thing? Kind of sounds like it. So, however hard we may struggle, we can only be rewarded in accordance with our desires. If we really want liberation and we work hard enough for it, we will get it. But if we really want power and pleasure, we can get them instead. So once again, you can use this force either positively. The force functions. It is powerful. It's just a matter of what you choose to use it for. Not only in this world and in this human form, but in other worlds as well. and other forms hereafter. Concentration upon any of the gross elements or the sense organs is said to bring us to the condition of disincarnate gods. Concentration upon the mind or the ego is said to make us one with the forces of nature and rulers of parts of the universe. If a Hindu speaks of heaven and hell, where he does not use the words in the accepted Christian sense. For to a Hindu, heaven and hell are both within Prakriti, and he believes in many planes of existence other than this earthly one, which is actually, people are starting to hear, because that's exactly where we are headed to. To these planes we may go for a while after death, impelled by the karmas we have accumulated here on earth, but we shall not remain in any one of them eternally. When the good or bad karma which earned them is exhausted, we will be reborn. Here is the one thing that I know some of you don't know, but I would love for you to know today. That I just read to you is absolutely true, and it is absolutely the end. I am going to give you a word of hope today, though. And that word of hope today is this. As that goes on, and as people begin to elevate above those baser things, if you said it like that, when you come back, you will not be subject to karma, because you will already be above the range of karma. Somebody ought to say amen, hallelujah. Do you understand that's what this that we're going through is all about? It is raising you to a point that you no longer have a karmic load. And then to live in that state of rightness, if I could. Because that's really how I view this on a lot of levels, folks. All that they're talking about in these words is righteousness, which is exactly what Robert Eisenman said about the Dead Sea Scrolls. When it comes down to the end of days, the only thing that matters is righteousness. His words are absolutely true. Did we need to tweak what righteousness was? Well, everyone has to tweak their definitions as they grow and learn. So concentration upon the gross elements or the sense organs is said to bring us to the condition of a discarnate God. Concentrating upon the mind or the ego is said to make us one with the forces of nature, or to lower us and the rulers of parts of the universe. If a Hindu speaks of heaven and hell, do they have it the way? No, they have the words, but they don't mean the same thing as what we were taught in Christianity. Okay? He believes in many planes of existence other than this earthly one, some infernally painful, some celestial pleasant. To these planes we may go for a while after death, impelled by the karmas we have accumulated here on earth, but we shall not remain in any one of them eternally. When the good or the bad karma which has earned them is exhausted, we will be reborn into mortal life. The only condition, according to Hindu belief, in which we are free to make the act of yoga is to unite ourselves with the Atman. And the desire for heaven is therefore an infinitely lower ambition than the desire for liberation. So they have a concept that it's better for me to ascend and to become the person than it is just to hope to go to some place where I am that. You met the mark, if you would. So the desire for heaven is then therefore infinitely lower ambition than the desire to be free. All Hindu literature makes a clear distinction between the two. When Sri Krishna is reproving Arjuna for his preoccupation with the problems of this phenomenal world, he speaks of the man who merely hopes for heaven. Note also Emerson's poem, Brahma. The strong gods pine for my abode, and pine in vain the sacred seven. For thou meek lover of the good, find me and turn thy back on heaven. The search for my higher self is the goal. And we've been taught when we all get to heaven what a day of rejoicing that'll be. So the strong gods are in fact not strong at all. They are in bondage to Prakriti, chained to the cosmos by their desire for power. They are among those who have failed to concentrate with non-attachment. Just as Shadow, these things that I am teaching are what I would say are the basis of teaching. If we get these right, you friend out there, you friend here, if we get this part right, everything else will stack on top of this foundation a whole lot easier. And it will not collapse. That's why Yeshua is the cornerstone. But we have to find out what that means. And of course, now we are finding out what that means. In fact, we have a really, really good understanding of what that means. And it's certainly not what I believed 25 years ago in Christianity. So, the strong gods are in fact not strong at all. They are in bondage to Prakriti, chained to this cosmos by their desire for power. They are among those who have failed to concentrate with non-attachment. And the Katha Upanishad, Yama, the god of death, admits that this frankly to Nakakita, well, I know that earthly treasure lasts but till the morrow, for did I not myself, wishing to be king of death, make sacrifice with fire? But the sacrifice was a fleeting thing, performed with fleeting objects, and small is my reward, seeing that only for a minute will my reign endure. Yama knows that one day he will have to leave his kingdom and be reborn as a man. Then and only then he will have another opportunity to turn his back on heaven and seek that union with the Atman, which is the only true immortality. I would state the Atman to you today, dear one, as your higher self. When you finally get connected to your higher self, you have all the answers that exist. We do not understand what our true higher self already possesses. We already, inside of you, have everything you need. The problem is we are woefully untrained of how to access that. Wow. Even those who seem to have it all going on, friend, still have to pay attention to non-attachment. I hope you guys are blessed. If any of you have, this is the book we're going to read. Guys, this is going to trip you out. We're going to read some real near-death experience, not near-death experience, past life regressions of people who personally knew Yeshua. You're going to learn some stuff. What I have pre-read blows me away because some of it I've spoken and been speaking, and all of a sudden it comes out. So this is a blessing for everyone. On Wednesday, it's called Jesus in the Essenes. You'll find out a little more than you've ever known about Jesus, Yeshua. You'll also find out more about John than you've ever known. You'll find out about the resurrection and history that you've never known. That Yeshua was quite the world traveler with his Uncle Joe. So, Blessings to each and every one of you. Source loves you. He loves you amazingly. He wants you to find the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We'll be back on Wednesday at 7, Source willing. Namaste.